Let's set the scene. The date is June 12, 2025. The city is Los Angeles, California. And the man of the hour is Senator Alex Padilla. Now, for anyone who doesn't follow California politics as closely as they follow the Kardashians, Alex Padilla is a big deal. He's a United States Senator representing the entire state of California, a job he got after serving as the state's Secretary of State. He's a prominent Democrat and one of the most senior Latino officials in the country. His job, in simple terms, is to be a voice for nearly 40 million people in Washington, D.C., and part of that involves keeping an eye on what the federal government is doing back home. It's a role that usually involves a lot of meetings, speeches, and handshakes, not, actual physical altercations with federal agents. So, on this particular Thursday, Senator Padilla found himself in a federal building in Los Angeles. He was originally there for a scheduled military briefing, a pretty standard part of his duties. But then he heard that another event was happening in the very same building, a surprise press conference hosted by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Given the heavy federal presence and ongoing immigration raids in his city, Padilla decided he should probably check this out. Wearing a polo shirt that literally said United States Senate, he walked into the room to exercise what's known as congressional oversight. He wanted to ask some questions on behalf of the people he represents. It seemed straightforward enough. A senator, a cabinet secretary, a room full of reporters. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it turns out a lot could go wrong. According to Padilla and video footage that surfaced almost immediately, he barely got a chance to open his mouth before things went sideways. He approached, identified himself, and tried to ask a question. The response wasn't a microphone and a "glad you could make it, Senator." Instead, federal agents, later identified as belonging to the FBI and Secret Service, surrounded him. They didn't just escort him out, they forcibly pushed him from the room and into a hallway. There, in a scene that looked more like an action movie than a political dispute, they shoved him face first onto the floor and slapped him in handcuffs. The whole thing was shocking. A sitting U.S. Senator on the floor in cuffs for trying to ask a question at a public event. It wasn't a protest where he was intentionally getting arrested for civil disobedience. He was, by his account, just trying to do his job. The incident was over quickly, but the images and the implications started spreading like wildfire. For a moment, the business of Washington, D.C. wasn't happening in the Capitol building, it was happening on a hallway floor in Los Angeles, raising some very serious questions about power, authority, and just how far the federal government was willing to go. When you have a story this wild, you can bet there are going to be two very different versions of what happened. On one side, you have Senator Padilla's account. He insists he was calm and professional. He explained that he was simply trying to perform his constitutional duty of oversight. In his view, he was a lawmaker seeking answers from a top government official about actions directly impacting his constituents. His office quickly released video that seemed to back him up, showing a chaotic but one-sided removal. Padilla later asked a powerful question. If this is how this administration responds to a senator with a question, you can only imagine what they're doing to farm workers, to cooks, to day laborers. He framed it not just as an insult to him but as a terrifying preview of how ordinary, powerless people are being treated. Then you have the other side of the story, brought to you by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Her version sounds like it came from a completely different event. Speaking on Fox News shortly after the incident, she painted a picture of a chaotic and aggressive interruption. She claimed Padilla didn't identify himself, burst into the room and started lunging towards the podium. This narrative suggests the federal agents were not suppressing a senator's question, but were instead reacting to a legitimate security threat. The White House backed her up, dismissing Padilla's actions as an immature theater kid stunt. According to this telling, Padilla was the aggressor, and the federal officers were just doing their job to protect a high-level official. The officers on the scene, a mix of FBI and Secret Service agents, were caught in the middle of this political firestorm. An unnamed Secret Service official later gave a slightly more neutral bureaucratic explanation. They noted that their agents often work off pins to recognize important people. And perhaps in the heat of the moment, Padilla's polo shirt and his presence weren't processed quickly enough to de-escalate the situation. After a brief detention, they interviewed the senator, determined he wasn't a threat, and even facilitated a short, tense meeting between him and Secretary Noem. This suggests a major breakdown in communication and protocol, at the very least. The stark contrast between these accounts is at the heart of the controversy. Was this a shameful abuse of power, where federal agents were used to silence a political opponent? Or was it a necessary security procedure to handle an unidentified man who appeared to be a threat? The video evidence seems to favor Padilla's version of events, showing no clear lunge toward the podium. But in today's political climate, people often see what they want to see, and the two narratives have hardened along party lines, turning a physical confrontation into a political Rorschach test for the entire nation. The dramatic arrest of a senator didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the boiling point of weeks of rising tension between California and the Trump administration. The reason federal agents and even military personnel are patrolling the streets of Los Angeles is rooted in President Trump's aggressive immigration enforcement policies. The Department of Homeland Security, led by Secretary Noem, has been conducting large-scale raids across the city, targeting workplaces, schools, and even churches. These operations have led to the detention of hundreds of people, sparking fear and outrage in immigrant communities and beyond. These raids were met with significant protests. Groups like CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, and labor unions organized demonstrations, which sometimes led to clashes with federal ICE agents. In response to the unrest, and without the consent of California's Governor Gavin Newsom, President Trump took a drastic step. He deployed nearly 5,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines to Los Angeles. The official reason was to assist with immigration enforcement and quell the protests. This move created a major constitutional showdown, as states normally have control over their own National Guard troops unless the president invokes a special law like the Insurrection Act, which he had not. California's leaders did not take this sitting down. Governor Newsom called the deployment an unlawful power grab, and the state immediately filed a lawsuit to challenge its legality. The situation escalated into a full-blown crisis of state versus federal power. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass condemned the federal actions, while Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, went as far as to suggest that state and local leaders like Newsom and Bass could be arrested for interfering with federal operations. This created an incredibly charged atmosphere in the city, where federal agents were seen by many not as peacekeepers, but as an occupying force. So when Senator Padilla walked into that press conference, he wasn't just walking into a room, he was walking into the epicenter of this national conflict. Secretary Noem was there to defend the federal presence, announcing that her department would sustain and increase our operations to liberate this city from the socialist leadership of California. The federal agents who arrested Padilla were part of this massive deployment. They were operating in a city under a state of heightened alert, with curfews in place and a deep mistrust between local residents and federal authorities. The incident with Padilla, then, was a symptom of a much larger disease, a profound and dangerous clash over the limits of federal power and the rights of states and citizens. The reaction to Senator Padilla's arrest was swift and sharply divided, mirroring the deep political polarization of the country. Democrats were unified in their outrage. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, former Vice President Kamala Harris, and Governor Newsom all used powerful language, calling the act dictatorial, shameful, and a stunning abuse of power. They saw it as a physical manifestation of the Trump administration's disregard for democratic norms and the rule of law. For them, if a U.S. senator could be treated this way, no one was safe. It was a clear line that had been crossed, transforming political disagreement into physical intimidation. On the other side of the aisle, most Republicans either criticized Padilla or stayed silent. A White House spokesperson framed it as a political stunt by the senator, and influential figures like Senator Lindsey Graham suggested Padilla should focus on policy debates rather than creating a scene. However, the condemnation wasn't completely partisan. Senator Susan Collins of Maine, a moderate Republican, broke from her party to call the video of the arrest very disturbing, adding that it was hard to imagine a justification for that. This rare crack in the partisan wall highlighted just how jarring the incident was, even for those who are politically aligned with the administration. The fallout from this event, combined with the ongoing federal operations, has spilled out onto the streets. The arrest became a rallying cry, fueling protests that have spread far beyond Los Angeles to cities like Chicago, New York, and San Francisco. A nationwide day of protest under the banner "No Kings" has been planned, drawing a direct line between the current administration's actions and the nation's founding principles against tyranny. Over 1,000 people have been arrested in these demonstrations, showing that the anger is widespread and deeply felt. This is no longer just a California issue, it's become a national moment of reckoning. Ultimately, the forcible removal of Senator Padilla matters because it crystallizes the stakes for everyone, especially regular people and immigrant communities. As Padilla himself pointed out, his experience offers a glimpse into the fear and vulnerability that many live with daily when confronted by federal power without a senator's platform to broadcast their story. The incident raises fundamental questions about American democracy. What are the limits of federal authority? What is the role of dissent and oversight? And what happens when political disagreements are no longer settled with words, but with force? This is more than a story about one politician's bad day. It's a stress test for the entire system.